Aloha. Welcome to the Big Wave Lager Live, brought to you by Kona Brewing Company. We're on the North Shore filming the action live from Waimea Bay. I'm lead forecaster and manager of Pacific Operations, Charlotte Perry. Have a solid shot of Northwest Swell. Peaked last night just shy of 20 feet on the Waimea buoy. Swell's trending down just a touch, but still hanging in solid 16 feet at 17 seconds from 326 degrees. That's being met with east-northeast trades and really nice conditions for Waimea. Size in the 20 to 25 foot range on the face. Occasional sets going 30 foot plus. Down a touch from first thing this morning, but still solid out there. I will be back with you in, well, actually, I don't even have to step away. We have Kevin Wallace stepping in right now, and we're going to break down this run at XL Swell that we have on tap right now, and then we're going to give you a kind of a breakdown of what went down this winter. February was pretty rough, but January had some fine moments, and so did December. We'll also take a look at a couple of the top 10 entries from the O'Neill Wave of the Winter, a couple of great rides at Pipeline and Backdoor. So plenty to run through. How we doing this morning, Kevin?
Hectic this morning. Hectic, just hectic all over the place. Watching Waimea go off this morning. Big swell, obviously, that hit Hawaii yesterday. Really came up quickly yesterday afternoon, and things have cleaned up a bit today too. We had kind of north to northeast wind for a lot of the day yesterday. Swell period was slightly shorter on Sunday as well, and as the swell period stretched out just a little bit, actually today we had almost two pulses in this swell, and really hanging in there nicely on the buoys this
Yeah,
morning.
pretty raw yesterday. It looked like before dark, that onshore wind. I mean, still most of the North Shore looks pretty washed out right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't call this the cleanest swell ever. Certainly, we've got some shorter period northwest to northwest swell in there too. I think something on the Waimea buoy, something like 5 feet or 6 feet at kind of 10 seconds. So that's mixing in there too. We had, like I mentioned, had onshore wind for most of the day
Yeah, I mean,
yesterday,
that
but
storm just came so close as it pushed
super
past the
close.
islands.
Yeah, I mean, essentially that northerly wind was part of that storm yesterday, and so you get all that mixing together, and it's still a little lumpy and bumpy, but it looks better now. Really looks fairly pretty, especially here at Waimea with the sun on it this morning like this, and you can see a couple waves popping off in the background there
Uh,
too in the outer
North
reefs.
Pacific just trying to gather itself after a pretty good St. Patty's Day.
Yeah, still a little hungover, but overall looking pretty good. I think our buoys, Waimea Bay buoy is still around 16 at 17, something like that. The interesting thing when you look at the buoys, one of our big indicators on the North Shore is buoy one. That's about 270 miles northwest of Oahu, and it's a great roughly half day indicator of swell, depending on swell direction and swell period. And most of the local buoys, Hanalei, Waimea, and the Pavela buoy off of northern Maui, have all been just as big, if not bigger, than what buoy one did. And that's a function of how
Uh,
that storm, the fetch lined up, and how it moved towards Hawaii. It actually showing more energy kind of from east to west versus seeing peak energy on the O1 buoy, which is what you typically see
Yeah, it was
for
definitely
Hawaii.
a surprise looking at that yesterday, and I think the Waimea buoy had 5 feet more swell than
Yeah,
the O1 buoy did when I took a peek at it.
yeah, yeah. So that's rare, and again, it's just a function of how that storm lined up, and we've got a couple of takers here.
Oh,
It's still bouncy and still a little funky, but a couple of diamonds in the rough, and I think the next couple of days are going to be interesting as well as we see basically the tail end of this swell kind of leftovers into tomorrow. You should see more of the normal breaks turn on. Today it's still basically Waimea and the outer reefs. Everywhere else is washed out just too big. But as we head into tomorrow, some of our normal spots will light up. The backdoor zone, pipeline, I think there's a pretty good chance that we'll go live again tomorrow. Um, oh, and here's pipeline right here. And you can see it's not looking pretty. I don't think there are any takers, none that I can see right
you
now.
don't want to take that second reef roll through on
Yeah,
on
and there's definitely going to be some washoes from third reef and the shoals way out the back there, and it's just a big washed out lineup. And this is what happens on the North Shore when you've got these big swells. There's really only a handful of breaks that start to work. You know, with Waimea being one of them, and then the outer reefs all throughout the North Shore will start to fire too. All the near shore breaks are just too big and washed out. But again, the next couple of days, I think you're going to see a vastly different looking lineup at Backdoor and Pipeline than what we're seeing today. And winds look really get much better tomorrow too. We're still kind of still fairly breezy northeast, shifting east northeast winds. As it goes more east northeast, that's better for the North Shore, and especially as it goes east and even east
Kinda
southeast, that's
looks
kind
like
of ideal for the North Shore. And that's what we're
tomorrow
looking at
lighter,
tomorrow.
a lot more east in
Yeah.
it, maybe even a east southeast to
Yeah,
it
it
look
looked like
like.
it was just slightly like a couple degrees south of due east, and so we've got better conditions tomorrow into those near shore spots. Are gonna
It's
start
it's
to turn
almost kind
hot.
of deceptive. You look at the rest of the cams around the North Shore and everything's just washed out and looks raw and pretty terrifying. And it makes Waimea almost look approachable, even though
Yeah,
it's still terrifying
it's
at
still
this
huge.
size.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so it's been a it's nice to see the North Pacific kind of start to fire again a little bit, as you mentioned just before I jumped on here. It was a very tough February. It was one
A
that was
lot of north wind.
yeah, characterized by it's high pressure that was generally north of Hawaii, and then we had these kind of little transient lows, either cutoff lows or Kona lows that were firing up to the south of that high. Um, oh, bomb.
That was a solid one.
Yeah, and so that drove that northerly wind. Very cool conditions, cold conditions on the North Shore by North Shore standards, and just a lot of poor surf days in general
Yeah,
throughout the month of February.
even got like quite a bit of snow on what was the
So
volcano in Maui that
So
got a
yeah,
ton of snow?
Haleakala actually
Yeah, that doesn't normally get a
got
lot.
snow. It's really rare if you get on Mauna Kea on the Big Island. You get snow. Snow is it's not it doesn't happen all the time, but it happens usually a handful of times a winter.
Yeah.
But for snow to see snow in Haleakala that's rare. It's been a while since we've seen that, and I think that was if I believe I'm right. That was around the time that's kind of the same storm that set up all that crazy storm swell around February 10th, Sunday, February 10th. Get a little cam rewind. Big orange board. What do you think the size of that board is? 10 feet?
At
10.6?
least 10.6, maybe 11.0.
Like 4 inches thick.
Not very fun to punch through the short break
Yeah,
there at Waimea.
Good luck duck diving. I don't think that's happening.
But back in January, we did have a pretty good run of northwesterly swells, nice conditions. It really looked like kind of the winter was getting off to a pretty good start before it kind of sputtered through February there.
Yeah, really, really spun on us. Yeah, when in January we had a good-looking storm track in the western North Pacific. A lot of storms are coming on a more southerly track off Japan, meaning swells had a lot more west in them. Really throughout for a good 2 to 3 week stretch in January. So we had a lot of west-northwest swells. We had very light winds. High pressure was either kind of non-existent north of the islands or somewhat transient, where you had all these lows sweeping by and really eroding the strength of the trade winds. You had a lot of light wind days. So we just had beautiful conditions. We had a number of really good waves at Backdoor Pipeline stretch, and I think it was basically all of the top candidates for a wave of the winter this year. They came in 2 phases. They came during the very big swell at the end of November, and then they also came during that run of 2 to 3 weeks in January, when we had all those great swells. During the Dahui Backdoor Shootout, they had just great waves throughout that event, and so I think all of the I don't know if every single one of the top 10 from those two time periods, but my guess is probably 80 to 90% of them.
Yeah, I think most of them were. I think we had a couple even come in really early in November.
Yeah, so that was it. It was the that's the same swell that they were able to run the Piahi Challenge on, which was like November 25th, 26th, something like that. We had I think it was Eli Olson at one of the outer reefs.
Yeah, I had that massive wave.
Huge wave. And then kind of on the upswing and the downswing of that swell, we had Mark Healy at Pipe and Cam Richards at Pipe as well.
Yeah, I think those are definitely 2 of the waves that stood the test of the winter.
Absolutely, yeah. It was, I think we were talking about this the other day a little bit too, and when I saw Healy's wave, I was just like, oh, that's like he won. It's over. That was one of the craziest waves I've ever seen at Pipe, and but I don't know. I think I've got a couple other favorites now. What's your favorite? What's your call?
Yeah, I definitely concur on the feeling that initially I was like, oh, all right, well, I guess Healy won it
Yeah,
already. And then Cam Richards' wave came in.
crazy one.
And that was just the length of barrel that he got and how that secondary section down on the inside, that it just didn't look like he was going to come out, especially from that front angle. But then during the Dahui backdoor shootout, you have Kato's wave. And that's probably the biggest really first reef pipe barrel you could get.
Yeah.
It kind of feathered a little bit, but then just unloaded.
Stacked up on first reef and unloaded, yeah.
How he set that whole thing up. I mean, so late, being able to kind of actually make it up under the lip.
Full airdrop.
Yeah.
That was, that's my favorite. It's
fellow regular foot.
Yeah. Crazy backside barrel. Yeah, just airdrop to, pump and negotiate that foam ball. As big a first reef wave as you're gonna see. That was as good as it gets. I think any of the wave of the winter contenders this year could have won just about any other. You look at Healy's wave or Cam Richards' wave. The other one that was really impressive to me was Tyler Newton's wave. Another really big, just kind of first reef pipe wave. It looked like it wanted to kind of roll in, feather a little bit from second, or maybe it did roll in from second reef. No, I think it was just straight first reef wave. Any of those I think could win just about any year. They were all super impressive waves, but Kato's wave was.
It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. So we'll see what the judges say. They've got their work cut out for them, and it'll be fun to see. I'm stoked for all the surfers, and it's been fun as a spectator to watch that as well, obviously.
Yeah, and if you are in Honolulu or capable to get there, Thursday, March 28th, there's going to be a Wave of the Winter awards party. Going to have Ron Artist II and The Truth. Doors open at 6:30 at the Republic, and it's 1349 Kapiolani Boulevard in Honolulu, Hawaii.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. Wish I was going.
Wouldn't be a bad Thursday.
Yeah. Thirsty Thursday. So just to recap here, we're live on the North Shore of Oahu at Waimea Bay. We've got a great swell running, big swell. This is the Big Wave Lager Live, brought to you by the Kona Brewing Company. And we've got solid surf. Northwest swell running. Waimea buoy is still kind of right around, I think, 16 feet at 16 seconds, something like that. So we've got, I don't know, probably solid 15-foot Hawaiian surf, maybe a little bit bigger than that. Still, there were some bigger sets this morning. Yeah. I think there were the very occasional set closing out the bay this morning, but from what we've seen so far this morning,
oh wow, look at that thing!
That's a little bit bigger. We're probably somewhere in the range of, on the bigger sets, probably 20 to 30 foot faces or so, maybe a touch bigger than that on some of the biggest sets.
It looks like those are getting a little more few and far between as we progress through the morning here.
Yeah. So the swell is on the decline now, slowly, but it will be coming down throughout the day, and it's going to continue to. We look at the wave out the back. How's that thing? And as we continue to move through the next couple of days, the swell is going to decrease further, and really see most of the nearshore spots, kind of the normal spots, turn on through the day tomorrow, and then it actually looks like we've got another pretty good sized swell coming up Wednesday and into Thursday. Winds don't look as good, starting somewhere around Wednesday afternoon into Thursday.
Yeah, but first thing in the morning, though, could be.
Well, yeah, Wednesday morning for sure. And then tomorrow, Tuesday, winds actually look excellent. Shifting more east to even almost east-southeast and pretty much all day. So it should be a fun one. And I think there's a decent chance that we might be right back here tomorrow sometime. But coming to you live from a different spot. We'll be watching for backdoor and probably still some pipe waves too. swell period starting to get a little bit short for pipe to be consistently working. But I
Not
think,
really an opportunity through all of February, and then here we are.
yeah, here we are, and they're stacking up now, just like this set's stacking up out the back. A beautiful beautiful morning there on the North Shore of Oahu as well. Mostly clear skies, solid swell. Still there is some lump in it. This storm really came quite close to the islands. Actually, we had the North Shore of Oahu had onshore north wind all day yesterday, and that was actually a function of that storm coming so close and kind of the supporting high pressure moving in as well. So it had northerly winds, some short period northwest swell running on the buoys and in the water, so it's a little bit lumpy. Waimea can kind of handle this wind and this swell better than other spots, but it's not the cleanest swell in the world, but still pretty solid as we check out the cam rewind here.
That was going good for a minute there, and that was a big step. That little bit of lump left over.
Yeah, there you go.
If you happen to be listening from the West Coast, we'll actually see this swell as we move into the middle of the week. North of Point Conception will be coming up through the day Tuesday, and for Southern California, will be coming up and peaking on Wednesday. And one thing to note is with how close the system got to Hawaii, how far south it was, that means this will actually be the most westerly swell that we've seen for the West Coast in quite some time that is going to pack a good bit of punch. So storm system really pushed down towards Hawaii, and then it actually pushed a bit to the east, so that's a good thing for us over here.
We got some questions for you, Shaw. So you're
Okay.
our primary Southern California forecaster. I've been working on this swell a little bit. I've been working on some Maverick stuff. There's at least an outside chance that the Mavericks event could run on Saturday. I haven't been paying attention as much to Southern California as I normally do. Obviously, surf here primarily. When am I going surfing the next couple of days? Well, I think I'm going surfing as soon as we're done here, actually looking out front.
This afternoon, probably be a good bet. Yesterday, actually, was probably the most fun it's been in quite a bit of time for a lot of areas. It felt like summer out there this weekend. Pretty nice again today. We're actually going to kind of transition, though. Got this little taste this summer, high pressure, offshore winds. But we're going to see storms return as we move through the middle of the week. So conditions will be a bit of a moving target, especially on Wednesday and Thursday, but there's going to be a lot of opportunity. We're going to have a nice combo running.
Yeah.
We have this west-northwest swell that kind of tops out Wednesday, Thursday for Southern California. A lot of breaks chest to head high, best breaks up to a few feet overhead, and even larger for some of the focal points like South San Diego, Southern Ventura, up through the northern half of Orange County. We'll also have a little bit of south swell running too. So we've seen the South Pacific come to life a little bit, gradually seeing better southern hemisphere swells, and those will be paired with these nice northwest swells you see on screen. This blob there pushing directly towards the island. That's a great track for massive surf.
Mm-hmm.
Really close there. Then you see that kind of gradually make its way across the eastern North Pacific towards the west coast. So that sets up our westerly swells for the back half of the week. And like you were saying, there's the swell that could potentially have the Mavericks Challenge run this weekend. That'll be a slightly more northerly swell than this one, but we'll still be enough west in that to get pretty good size into Southern California. We're going to continue to see Southern Hemisphere swell through the back half of this week. So looks like actually the best little south swell that we've seen in the season so far will be topping out Wednesday into Thursday. Not a massive swell, but lowers, for instance, yesterday looked like chest to head high, maybe a bit overhead on the best sets, and had a great afternoon of surf there. Nice cleanup in the evening. Looking really fun down there this morning, that whole zone, the Trestles area, just loves these south swells. And, a couple of waves out front here, like you were mentioning, really looks fun in Huntington, and quite a few waves around. And then we're also going to have that west-northwest swell running. So pretty much everybody in Southern California is going to be getting a couple waves at the end of this week. It'll just be
peaks and spread out.
Yeah, dialing in the conditions too.
Yeah. So no shortage of swell. We just got to find those windows of good conditions. It's a shame that I think, as you mentioned, we'll have some windows, it looks like. I certainly wouldn't mind us having the same conditions we've had the last couple days going through the rest of the week.
It's too bad that we didn't get the offshore flow that we had the end of last week when it was about waist high. on Wednesday and Thursday.
Yeah.
That'd probably be one of the better
Better days
combo swells that we've seen in quite a while. If you're just joining us, a little recap here. We're coming at you live with the Big Wave Lager Live, brought to you by Kona Brewing Company. We're on the North Shore filming Waimea Bay. Have a solid Northwest swell. Swell actually peaked late yesterday, but still hanging tough. 16 feet at around 17 seconds on the Waimea buoy. So washing out most of the North Shore, but looking pretty good for the bay.
Yeah, we've got beautiful conditions. We've got mostly sunny skies now. Trades have come back. Trades more northeast, shifting east northeast throughout the day today. We had pretty much onshore wind all day yesterday on the North Shore. Pretty breezy northerly flow. You can still see some of that residual lump in the water too. It's there. It's just a little bit lumpy, a little bit bumpy, but it has cleaned up, and it's going to continue to clean up through the day today and going into Tuesday. We've got even better conditions as the swell continues to drop off, and I think our near shore spots are going to start to line up and look really good. We'll probably move back. The action is going to move back towards the back door and pipeline section, and although the wave of the winter has officially, Surfline and O'Neill wave of the winter has officially closed, I think there's going to be maybe some local bragging rights still going down potentially tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We'd mentioned a little bit earlier that we had some of the candidates from the wave of the winter, so the top 10. So let's have a look at them.
All the way back to November.
Yeah, and this is that swell that this is the same swell kind of on the upside that the Jaws event eventually ran on. Were these late November swells, November 25th and 26th, I think were the 2 days that we had just excellent surf at pipe pumping surf, and some of the.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the light there. It looks like that was probably a little bit later in the day there.
Yeah.
That swell is really just continuing to come up.
Here's one of our, I think both one of our personal favorites, Healy's wave.
How far he goes before he even starts to set up the barrel.
There's the boil. He's gone like 200 yards already.
I thought that was it.
Yeah, I think pretty much everyone, and then Cam's was that's right. Cam's was in early December. I'd forgotten that his was a little bit later than the Jaws swell, but just another crazy one.
Little cheater 5 there in the bonus section.
I think this was like he was riding like a 9-foot board that his dad had shaped too, or something like that.
Nice little storyline there.
Yeah.
That's just unloading.
This is one of my favorites was Tyler's.
So it was a second reef roll in.
Yeah, it was a second reef roll in. And this was during that stretch during January. We had about a 3-week stretch in January where we just had, I'm going to just hold off and appreciate this.
Wow.
That's as
crazy
a wave as you're just going to see anywhere.
Don't forget about backdoor.
But yeah, so this was that, roughly 3-week stretch through January where we had a bunch of swells that were more west-northwest. We had excellent conditions. You can see really it's almost glassy on some of those days. We had really light, either light trades or light southeast winds, days when it went light and variable as you had fronts approaching the island. So you just had this run of insane conditions.
If we pulled up footage from February, it wouldn't even look like the same year.
No, the crazy thing was, the day that I...
That's right when you went, isn't it?
Yeah, the day that I went over I was on the North Shore for the Vulcan Pipe Pro. We were doing the forecast, and so I went over for about 3 weeks during the event. The day I went over, which I believe was January 28th, Friday, January 28th, if I'm correct. It was beautiful in the morning. We landed, and the wind went north, and it basically stayed north for the month, with the exception of a couple pockets. The Pipe Pro kind of ended up lucking out. Had a tough day that they had to run, but then got a couple other days that really ended up being pretty good, and they got pretty decent surf, all things considering the way things were looking at the beginning of the waiting period and how things turned out for, they probably got the 2 best days in February, arguably, to run the event.
It ended up being great waves for it.
Yeah.
But it was...
So, yeah, it's always a treat for me to be able to go to to go over to the North Shore, and I get to spend a few weeks over there every year.
Uh,
This year was a little tough for me in the surf department. I didn't surf as much. How is this set?
Wow, it's a solid one.
Bummer.
Oh, negotiating the bump.
Yeah, but it was tough. Yeah, it was. I did get to sneak over to some of the alternate sides of the island, I'll say, as winds were swirling around, and I got a couple spots that I like to get. So I was lucky to
And this
get
is
that.
one of the nice things about being on an island.
Yeah, it's always offshore somewhere. Yeah.
Just hopefully there's waves where it's offshore.
Yeah, exactly. Most of the time it was the South Shore when it was flat. Um, but yeah, it was a tough February for the North Shore, tough February for the West Coast. Unless you're a skier or snowboarder,
Yeah,
and then
unless
it was one of the better Februaries we've seen in a very, very long time.
That's nice when I spent 10 days in Tahoe and got 10 feet of snow while I was there
Yeah,
in the
there
upper
you go.
mountains. I mean, hard to beat that, but the waves were not very kind to us.
Yeah,
I don't think I surfed the entire month of February.
I don't know. I didn't surf on the West Coast. I don't think I got one day here. A few days in Hawaii. I didn't get up to the mountains as much as I'd like, or at all, unfortunately. But yeah, it's all that whole pattern. It's all tied in, obviously.
Yeah,
north wind in Hawaii, and then with the high kind of north of Hawaii and the little cutoff low, and then we get
those Kona lows just feeding the atmospheric rivers and just pummeling the West Coast with precipitation.
Yeah. It's interesting to see how it all works out, and when we were looking back at the winter, kind of around October or so, when you especially put out our seasonal forecast for for the West Coast, for Hawaii, places like that, I think really we ended up doing pretty well in our calls. There were a couple times where I was a little worried. I'm like, oh man, it's kind of pumping right now. It seems like it's going to be a crazy winter, and then
Well, it was interesting too, is that looking back through a number of the kind of weak to moderate El Nino years, is both for Hawaii and the West Coast, there was really a front loading of solid swells into kind of late November, December, January, and then things slow down in February. And typically, the peak of production in the North Pacific is January into February, and we pretty much just got shut out in February. So it's kind of cool to see that work out. Obviously you'd rather see your forecast end up being wrong and having it being really good for a while. But I was definitely worried as we're moving through January, and I was like, all right, well, it's kind of thinking a lot of these things were going to come in maybe at or a little bit below seasonal norms, and days that were fair or better were going to be kind of a little bit lower as well than normal. And we're coming into the second week of January, and there was solid west swell on the West Coast. I mean, for Southern California, a couple of the biggest west swells we've seen in a number of years, waking up all sorts of breaks. And and then February just shut down. Bad for everybody surfing, but I guess good for my forecast.
Snowboarding, work.
Yeah, good for snowboarding. Got a lot of work done.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that Charlie, that you lead, obviously, too, and a great tool for our premium subscribers to check out is we do offer seasonal forecasts for just about anywhere domestically that we provide a premium analysis, and that looks at, that goes beyond 2 weeks out. That kind of takes a look at the next 6 to 8 weeks, what we might expect seasonally, what climatology says, and climatology is just kind of average surf heights for throughout the month, based on the last 30 to 35 years of data that we have. So what are when you're putting together those really valuable seasonal forecasts, especially if you're looking to travel to an area, what are the things that you're checking out when you're developing those seasonal forecasts?
First and foremost, you take a look at kind of what's going on around the world at a given time. You take a look at different type of large scale climate indicators, whether it's the phase of Enzo, whether you're in a La Nina and El Nino, whether you happen to be, one of the things with El Nino and La Nina is really need to be generally in a stronger phase of it, like a really strong La Nina, a really strong El Nino to see really a direct impact, but it's kind of a good place to start. And you kind of see where you're at there, see what the trend is, and then look at anomalies from the past and try to figure out, where do storms set up when we have this type of pattern going on. Look through the next couple of months, and then have a dig at kind of the longer term climate models that go out anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, depending on who you're looking at, and get a feel for what those are showing, and really kind of see if they're linking up anywhere. And when you kind of see those patterns and they're repeating themselves, or you look at kind of 4 or more different runs of a climate model and you have them all paired up together, and you're like, okay, we have 4 of these ensemble members, and they're all kind of hinting at this one thing. And you really, you're not predicting specific swells per se, but you're like, oh, it really looks like this portion of the South Pacific is going to have a kind of a good run through this 10-day, 2-week, 3-week period, and can really help you kind of say whether or not you're going to end up above or below the climatology for a given period.
Yeah, and I think it's for anyone that's looking to travel on swells, especially. Say you're looking to go down to Central America and score a swell. You can look at the climatology. You can look at those seasonal forecasts that we issue.
Kind of have it on your radar. Maybe you don't pull the trigger right away, but you kind of start to move your ponds around a bit and let the wife know that you might disappear for about 10 days.
I think that's how I always encourage people to utilize our forecast, whether it's very long-term seasonally or whether it's long-term, meaning, 10 to 14 days out, is not to focus so much on specific numbers and timing of swells, but to keep an eye on the trends. If you see that a swell is pretty consistent 10 to 14 days out, you might see some fluctuations in size and the exact timing
Sometimes
of it.
It'll fully disappear for a day or two.
But if you see that pretty consistently on the models, that's when you should start to feel pretty good about it happening and something to watch. And you could start to plan a trip around that. Again, if you are going with the knowledge that it might not happen exactly as what you're seeing on that particular run of the model, but that it's generally an active pattern, and then we'll speak to that in our premium analysis as well. And a lot of times we'll give confidence ratings, things like that. Low, medium, high confidence on particular swells or particular patterns developing. I think that's one way where we can add value.
Yeah,
as human forecasters.
just speaking to that and looking at kind of probably second week of February, the climate models actually started keying in on almost this exact pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Started talking to a much better, kind of stronger potential for a better storm track across the central North Pacific as we moved into the middle of March. And here we are just after the middle of the month. And it's always cool when they nail it. They certainly don't all the time, but it's pretty cool when it works out.
And if you're just joining us, we'll welcome you to the Big Wave Lager Live, brought to you by the Kona Brewing Company. We are live on the North Shore of Oahu at Waimea Bay, and we've got solid but slowly decreasing swell, and we are seeing surf, probably space sizes on the bigger sets, probably somewhere in the 20 to 30 foot range on the face. They seem to be decreasing in consistency a little bit, and that should be the case. We should see the swell gradually trend down through the afternoon.
A little cleaner than first thing this morning, though.
Yeah, it's conditions have cleaned up. We had North Shore saw onshore northerly winds pretty much all day yesterday on Sunday as the swell rapidly came up. Went from basically nothing on the buoys to huge on the buoys over the course of about 6 to 10 hours yesterday. We're still very solid on the buoys this morning. Waimea Bay buoy is in the 16-foot range at I think 16 to 17 seconds still this morning. And so you've got really pretty solid surf. This is kind of a smaller to medium-sized set wave here, probably the biggest waves.
It's kind of entry level out there this morning.
Yeah, the biggest waves we've seen in the morning, maybe somewhere around 1.5 times the size of what we're seeing here. Fairly inconsistent, but they are out there. There's a little bit of leftover lump and bump in the water, again from that onshore northerly wind. We saw
too much green Kona lager.
little ocean's still a little hungover from that onshore northerly wind and some shorter period, just kind of wind swell in the mix. I think about 5 feet at 9 to 10 seconds still on the buoys as well. So not the cleanest of swells, but it's improved significantly since yesterday, and There are a couple pretty good waves out
It
here at
definitely looks a
Waimea.
lot better at Waimea than just about all the rest of the North Shore.
Yeah, yeah. Waimea is able to handle this combination of swell and wind better than most other spots. You can see a couple of the outer reefs kind of starting to cap in the background here, and really those are the only spots that are going to be able to handle this swell today. They'd be the outer reefs and Waimea. All the near shore spots, Pipe, Backdoor, Rocky Point, even Sunset are going to be too big and washed out today and pretty much unmanageable. But heading into tomorrow, that really
That's
should
going to change.
Yeah. We'll have a look at this is pipeline here, and you can see it's just it's just washing through, and it's messy, getting waves rolling in from second and third reef, just kind of washing out the lineup, and no takers, as you can see. At least I'm not seeing any takers out here
Second
right
reef
now.
roll-ins look a lot better when it's clean.
Yeah, yeah. So just too much swell here on offer, but we should see a dramatically different lineup tomorrow. I think there's at least a decent chance it will be live again tomorrow. And looking at this stretch of reef again, backdoor and pipeline, we should have some good backdoor waves on offer tomorrow. Swells dropping by roughly half, and
A touch more north in it.
yeah, and we've got good wind conditions likely for tomorrow. Wind shifting today from northeast to east northeast, and then by tomorrow looking at straight east winds, even just a couple degrees south of east, so east to east southeast wind, and overall should be quite a bit cleaner. And we'll be right back, so stay tuned.
I think the world knows aloha in different ways. What aloha means to me is to wake up every morning and try to be the best version of yourself that you can be. Whether it be big or small, just always trying to move forward. That to me is pretty special.
All right, welcome back. We're live on the North Shore. This is the Big Wave Lager Live, brought to you by the Kona Brewing Company. We are live from Waimea Bay on the North Shore of Oahu with a solid swell in the water. Came up rapidly yesterday throughout the afternoon.
Wild and woolly.
Yeah, it was a kind of a stormy day, and things have settled considerably this morning. And it's still not perfect conditions by any means, but the wind's back down a little bit. It's shifted to more northeast to east northeast direction, and we've got some pretty good waves here on offer at Waimea Bay. The Waimea Bay buoy is reading around 16 feet at 16 seconds. The bigger set waves we're seeing at the bay this morning, probably mostly 20 to 30 foot faces, maybe a couple that are a little bit bigger than that. I think there were mention of a couple of closeout sets early this morning, kind of right as the sun was coming up. Certainly we haven't seen any of those in a little while. Swell is decreasing now, but we've still got solid conditions on tap. And
cleaning up pretty nicely through the morning.
yeah, yeah, and just overall improving surf, and really some fun looking waves if you consider very large waves fun, but fun by Waimea standards, I think.
Yeah, deceptively approachable.
Yeah,
from afar.
Yeah, and this is the view of actually our Surfline camera here, and
A solid set stacking up.
yeah, got some lines stacking up, and this swell is a product of a storm that really kind of developed late last week and into the weekend. Came very close to Hawaii. In fact, the northerly winds that the North Shore saw yesterday were a product of that low and supporting high pressure really coming close to the islands. We had, I think, 40 to 50 knot winds at around 12 to 1,500 miles of Hawaii, and then 30 knot winds that nose to really just a couple hundred miles of the islands on Saturday. And so it's somewhat of a raw, somewhat jumbled swell. It's not like the cleanest swell you're ever going to see, because that storm was really quite close. And we had also a little bit of local short period swell mixing in too from those northerly winds. But that's almost what Waimea kind of likes, that type of swell. You really
a little
need
bit shorter period. Storm comes close.
Yeah, you really want to see a swell with very large deep water swell height. If you compare, say, Waimea to a spot like Sunset, or especially a spot like Jaws can take a 10-foot very long period swell, say a 10-foot swell at 20 seconds, and turn it into 30 to 40, maybe 50-foot waves. It's pretty crazy. Waimea on that same swell maybe 20-foot faces, maybe.
Yeah, it doesn't really,
Yeah.
not overly impressive.
No, you get the way the bathymetry is set up, or the underwater topography of the North Shore. You've got outer reefs at outside alligators, and then also at outer log cabins that tend to pull away that longer period energy, especially 17 seconds and above, and leaves Waimea in somewhat of a swell void. So it really
I mean,
takes.
part of the reason it was so much larger last night before dark was that initial energy, that peak in energy that we saw last night was around 14, 15 seconds.
Yeah, yeah. So you really need a large deep water swell for the bay to really get going. You think about kind of all the days that the eddy event has run, and that those swells typically were showing somewhere between 18 and 22, and very occasionally, 20-foot plus, 20, almost 25-foot deep water swell height on the buoys. The last time the eddy was run, which was in February of 2016, that was a huge swell. I want to say that was 20 to 22 feet plus on the Waimea Bay buoy, if I remember
Yeah, it
correctly.
looks like I have the Waimea Bay buoy up right now, looking at the buoy report, and right around 18 at 15 last night.
Well,
So,
yeah, that's some juice.
yeah, if we're looking at that this morning, probably see a couple waves closing out.
Yeah, yeah. And you'll start to see the closeout sides of the bay. Typically, when face heights exceed around 40 feet, somewhere around 45 feet. And take a look at the storm actually that created this swell, the secondary purple blob. One thing that really helped in the size and consistency
Dives
is
right towards
yeah,
him right there.
the storm moved almost directly at the islands for a period of about 24 hours or so. And it's kind of a sliding scale with with surf heights and how big a swell will eventually be for a given location.
A huge part of the equation right there is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
track.
In a perfect world, if you're going to maximize size on a swell, you want a storm that moves directly towards you, that's fairly close, but still far enough away that you don't see local
Have the
weather.
northerly winds like
Yeah,
we were
yeah,
dealing with yesterday.
yeah. So for a spot like Waimea, you want to see the storms probably within about 1,000 miles, or right around 1,000 miles. So it would be, it's close enough to where you're getting a really big deep water swell. It doesn't have to travel a long distance, and with the greater travel distance, you get what's called greater decay, or the swell getting smaller as it travels. And with the less decay, you get the bigger deep water swell. You have a storm that moves directly towards you. That can really enhance the size and also really enhance the consistency. And then you just need a strong storm too. Even if you've got a storm that's really close and it moves right towards you, but it's only got 20 knots of wind, the swell's just not going to be that big.
It's not gonna be that big.
Yeah. But if you've got a storm that's very close, that moves right towards you, is really big, and
Especially if it's moving directly towards you for a period of a couple of days.
Couple days,
So
yeah.
you kind of get up towards 36, 48, 72 hours of a storm system kind of pushing towards you. You really get into captured fetch territory, and you can really just be much more, the ocean's much more, well, the ocean specifically, but you're just much more efficient at creating large surf.
Yeah. And for any of you boys and girls out there that haven't heard the term captured fetch, or sometimes called traveling fetch or dynamic fetch, that means the storm is moving at a pace to which the strongest wind remains over the strongest developing seas. And when we see storms like that, again, it really enhances the size. It really enhances the consistency, and you'll frequently see swells that come in that they'll be larger than what the swell model guidance was. What the computers were predicting, it'll be larger than that. A great, relatively recent example of that was the big swell on the North Shore for the end of November that the Jaws event was run on. That thing just ended up had so much power and consistency and size, because it was just this huge storm that took a great track towards the islands and basically moved right at the islands for about a period of 36 to 48 hours, something like that. And, that was one of the bigger swells we've
Really
seen
impressive.
in a long
It
time.
helps drive up the swell period too.
Mhm. Yeah. And a spot like Jaws, that swell period it plays such a huge role in determining the size of the eventual surf, but then just how approachable it is too, from kind of a paddle versus tow standpoint. When you've got these swells where they have a lot of energy in the very, very long periods, say like 20 seconds and above,
Those waves are moving.
they're moving so incredibly fast that they are very difficult to paddle into. And then you combine that with, Maui glass, even when there's no, when it's by Maui standards, trades are light, that's still kind of 15 knot plus trades. And then you're moving into those trades with a wave that's
It's a lot of bump on a lot of wave.
yeah, the wind accelerates up the face. You just have this incredibly challenging wave to try and tackle, and we saw that with that for day one of the Piali event. And you saw guys like Billy Kemper and Twiggy just get the most insane. Like those were two of the most insane waves I've ever seen anybody attempt. In my life. I was kind of freaking out at home when I was watching that stuff because it was so big and so gnarly and
Just impressive to see.
yeah. And while Waimea typically isn't as impressive as Jaws, really nowhere is. We still have pretty impressive surf fight here. We are coming to you live from the North Shore of Oahu at Waimea Bay. This is a big wave logger live, brought to you by Kona Brewing Company. We've got some solid northwest swell on the water today. Conditions are cleaning up and improving on the North Shore. Still a little bit lumpy and bumpy for sure, but as the swell decreases, conditions are likely to continue and improve this afternoon. And then we've got even better conditions heading into tomorrow, and we should see those normal spots start to turn on tomorrow as well.
Yeah, I might even see a couple normal spots kind of
Late today.
late today before
Yeah.
dark.
Yeah, give a check to our HD cams at Pipeline this evening, local time, Hawaiian local time. If you're on the West Coast, have a look starting around 8 o'clock tonight. Should be pretty fun to see. Should see it be cleaning up and dropping. Probably have a few people at least attempting it out there. We've cut to our pipe cam a couple times so far, and nobody's out, and for good reason. It's just kind of washed out and too big and gnarly. But
Smooth one coming through right there.
yeah, but late this afternoon and this evening, winds almost always improve during that evening session on the North Shore. The lighting gets really good, and so it should be kind of fun to watch some of those nearshore spots like Pipe late today and especially tomorrow. We'll take a look at this camera rewind, a little party wave.
It's a pretty good party.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. And I haven't counted specifically yet, but interesting to see the number of guys and gals that are wearing flotation versus those that aren't.
Yeah, we were having a conversation just before we went live, and a lot of the guys are wearing them
Yeah,
and gals. It's just almost like, why not?
makes sense. Yeah, I thought it was to the best of my knowledge, this was an idea that Shane Dorian came up with when he was, I don't know if it was actually at the time he was being held under for 2 or 3 waves in a row at Mavs, but shortly thereafter.
Had some time to think about it.
Yeah. Shannon's obviously one of the best big wave surfers in the world and has been for a long time, but also a family man. I know his wife and his kids mean a lot to him, and so I think he's mentioned that they were on his mind as he was going through that hold down and wondering if he was going to see him again. So it's cool to see someone who's that influential in just riding waves also become super influential in safety measures in the water as well. And I think I have really enjoyed the movement around different groups. We've got the big wave risk assessment group that'll hold clinics really at this point around the world and just talk about big wave safety and how it becomes really almost becomes like a team event versus an individual pursuit with just making sure that everyone comes home safe and alive.
And it's almost like avalanche backcountry courses.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy. And it's as long as that the avalanche stuff has been going on, you see improvements, and people are still unfortunately getting caught, but you see an improvement in the safety record, and people have been doing that for a long time. This idea around having safety in place for all these big swells relatively new, in big wave surfing. I don't know, maybe has been going on for 10 years. Or obviously, Laird and the boys way back when they were towing each other in, they were all looking out for each other. But I think it's come into greater vogue, so to speak, in probably the last 10 years with guys like Greg Long and Cole Christensen and Danilo and all those guys that have kind of brought that safety element in, and we've seen it pay off. The Aaron Gold incident at Cloudbreak a couple years ago, when he was revived on the boat thanks to like really good teamwork by the group of guys there. Even Greg Long.
Greg Long out at Cortez.
Yeah. So I'm glad those guys are still around.
We're going to take a quick break. A word from our sponsor.
I think the world knows aloha in different ways. What aloha means to me is to wake up every morning and try to be the best version of yourself that you can be. Whether it be big or small, just always trying to move forward. That to me is pretty special.
All right, welcome back and welcome to the Big Wave Logger Live, brought to you by Kona Brewing Company. I am Director of Forecasting Kevin Wallace, and here with Surfline lead forecaster Schaller Perry. We are live on the North Shore of Oahu at Waimea Bay with solid but easing northwest swell and pretty good conditions. Really beautiful morning on the North Shore.
We've got some solid great out there. Didn't look like this yesterday.
No, yeah, we had. This swell came up very quickly yesterday afternoon, went from 0 to 100 in just a few hours, but we unfortunately had onshore wind pretty much all day yesterday out of the north, and you can still see a little bit of that residual bump in the water too here, especially when we go to one of the different angles the guys dropping in. You can see some lump and bump in the water out there, so it's not perfect conditions, not a perfect swell by any means, but it's pretty good, and there's some good waves out here. We're probably, Hawaiian scale, we're probably around 15 feet. So face sizes somewhere in the 20 to 30 foot range on the larger sets. We saw a couple bigger ones this morning. Heard some rumors about maybe a couple closeout sets early this morning in the bay, but we haven't seen any of those for a little while. And now just kind of just like a mid-sized day at the bay. Nothing giant, but certainly some waves that'll get your heart beating a bit.
Oh, absolutely. Deceptively approachable from here.
Yeah, yeah. The rest of the North Shore is basically washed out, with the exception of Waimea and the outer reefs. Have a look at pipe here, and you can see waves just washing through from Third Reef. Just a mess out there. This lineup, I think, is going to look dramatically different by tomorrow.
That should look pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. I think the swell will be down by half or maybe a little bit more. We'll see improving wind there too. Winds aren't perfect today on the North Shore, but improving. And this is just a look back at the storm that created this swell, this secondary purple blob that's going to dive down towards Hawaii.
Just right towards the islands there.
Yeah. And so that was really important in the size and consistency of the swell, and especially as we look for a spot like Waimea that needs kind of these set parameters to break, and especially to be big, because you want that storm to move towards you. You want it to be close. This storm in particular had like a 40 to 50 knot winds at around 1,200 miles from Hawaii, and winds up to 30 knots, just a few
Pretty
hundred miles
close
away.
yesterday.
Yeah. And even basically the northerly wind, the onshore northerly wind that the North Shore saw all day yesterday, was a product of this low sweeping pass and high pressure kind of building in behind it. So we've seen, we're seeing impressive numbers on the buoys. I think we're still in the 16-foot range at 17 seconds.
17 seconds.
Yeah, that's the Waimea buoy, the Hanalei and Pavela buoy, which is off the North Shore of Maui, are very similar. So we've got extra large surf throughout the islands. I haven't heard specifically how Piahi is doing today, but should be actually significantly bigger than what we're seeing here at Waimea, especially with the swell period actually still fairly long today at kind of 16 to 17 seconds.
Just the latest update on the Waimea buoy. We're just under 16 feet now at 15 seconds.
Okay, so the swell is starting its tapering off. It's going to do so throughout the day today. We'll be coming down. The buoy 1, which is kind of a half-day indicator for the North Shore. It's about 270 miles northwest of Oahu. Is definitely coming down pretty quickly. Although the interesting thing is that the Waimea Bay buoy and some of the local buoys were actually saw as big or bigger swell heights as compared to buoy 1, which is relatively rare, and that's a function of where that storm and fetch set up and kind of the storm's energy.
How that dropped to the south, right towards the islands. It kind of circumvented around the O1 buoy there a little bit.
Yeah, so it was, you saw more energy going from west to east, and as a function of, that's a good sized wave.
Yeah, still a couple solid ones coming through out there. A lot cleaner conditions than first thing this morning. Had that northerly wind last night as the storm moved by. As we saw, high pressures gradually shifting a bit further to the east. That's setting up to the north of the islands and giving us more typical trade wind flow out of the east-northeast today. But as we move into tomorrow, see that trend a little more southerly even. So east to east-southeast through the day tomorrow. There's another storm system approaching middle of the week. So winds get a little dicey through the day Wednesday. But really a great couple days of surf after a pretty lackluster February.
Yeah, it was. February was very tough. We had a lot of either north wind days and cool to cold conditions, especially by Hawaii standards, and/or we saw a lot of days with really
shorter
strong
period
trades.
northerly swell.
Yeah, just kind of funky swell. We lost all the west swells, west northwest swells we saw during January for a 3-week or so stretch turned into more north-northwest and north swells. Tended to be kind of shorter to mid-period, or at least had a lot of shorter period energy mixing in, depending on the position of some of these lows. And so February was rough on the North Shore and just northern exposed shores in Hawaii in general. It was a generally poor month of surf with a couple of quick windows.
It'd be a season bookended by nice conditions with a little bit of not so great conditions mixed in there in the middle.
Yeah. This is we're getting towards the end of the North Pacific season. We're getting a little flurry here in the middle of this month, and
I mean, even the South Shore was pretty good last week.
Yeah, we had kind of the first real swell of the season I guess not the weekend that just passed, but about 9 days ago, and town was really fun. And Southern Shores in general had a little 2 to 2.5 foot swell, so it was chest to head high or so at the better spots with good conditions. And we are seeing, this is a transitional time of year. This is when we see the North Pacific start to slow down. We don't see as many North Pacific swells, but we do see the South Pacific start to come alive and see more southerly swells develop.
Decent surf all over the place.
Yeah. So it's a fun time of year. Whether if you're in Hawaii, you can go to many of the different shores. If you are in California, we start to see combo swells this time of year. And Charlie, I know you are our primary Southern California forecaster, and we've had some waves the last couple of days. More like good conditions versus really like good waves, but it's been kind of fun, and we've got more coming this week. Is that correct?
Nice conditions, modest surf. The end of last week is almost too much offshore wind for the size of the surf in a lot of cases. But as we move through the weekend, we saw a little bit more southern hemisphere swell come in.
That's a bomb.
That is a solid wave right there. But yeah, a little more southern hemisphere swell into yesterday, especially. There were a couple fun waves around us. It's just a solid set.
Yeah, this is one of the better sets we've seen in a while.
Wow.
Ooh.
I'm glad I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
Wow, what a set there.
Too.
Yeah, geez.
Yeah, this is one of the better sets we've seen in some time now.
At least an hour. Oh, what a
Backside.
great one. Just drawing all the water off the reef there. Later wave in the set, nice and smooth.
Yeah, clean things out a bit.
Pull the wrinkles out of the sheets.
Yeah, all right, so let's get away from 20-foot Waimea and get back to talking about
waist
high Southern California.
Let's talk about 3-foot Southern California. It was like summer here this weekend. A couple of waves around yesterday. A little bit more of that southern hemisphere swell. Places like Trestles, even North Orange County around town here. We had a couple of pretty fun waves. Nothing substantial, but really, I mean, the most fun surf that I've had in quite a number of weeks.
Yeah.
As we move through the next couple of days, we have a little modest shot at west-northwest swell running today. That's doing a lot of good things for most breaks. And then there's also
everyone's scraping here. What are they?
They're not scraping because there's a waist-high wave coming in Huntington. That's for sure. What do we got here? We gonna close the bay out again? It's been a few hours. Wow.
On. Yeah, that was this. It was nice to see warm. I think the last few days in Southern California and California general. How's this set? Yeah.
Wow. I thought he was going over the bars for a minute there.
Yeah. I think this is the first time in like 2 months where we saw above normal temps in California too.
Yeah, no, it's been Hawaii had a tough stretch of surf, and we did along the West Coast too. Had a lot of storm systems either kind of actually moving from almost our west-southwest, those Kona lows towards the West Coast, and then storm systems dropping right down along the coast. So a mix of shorter period, either steep northwest swell or these kind of funky west-southwest mid-period swells that were kind of gutless and conditions were not all that great. And we seen a trend, we have this, the storm system that set up this swell here sends the West Coast a really fun run of waves for Wednesday through the back half of the week. Northern California getting in on that energy on Tuesday, but for SoCal, quite a bit of west in this swell. As we're mentioning, the storm system dropped so close to Hawaii. That's a great thing for Southern California because it means the swell that we're going to see is fairly westerly. So we're not going to have as much energy cut off by Point Conception. So getting a good bit of swelling. And then also we've seen this little uptick in activity in the southern hemisphere. We're seeing a little bit more energy out of the South Pac today than we did over the weekend and even the beginning of last week. And as we move into Wednesday, Thursday, it looks like the best little swell of the bunch will be topping out, and it'll be off the combo, probably a couple feet overhead, and it's not going to be nearly as massive as that wave that just went down. Look at the rewind of this set. Wow.
Yeah, the funny thing to me about the North Shore sometimes, like you'll be over there and it's small by local standards in the winter or whatever, and everyone's kind of like, oh, it's small, it's flat or whatever, and it's head high it's ever had. It's clean. It's like this would be the day of the year in Huntington Beach,
Oh
and
my
it's
goodness.
this like flat afterthought of a day.
I'll tell you what, it looked
on
really
North
good
Shore.
out there out front this morning.
I know,
Though. Even with
it's
the high tide, doing a great job. Couple
yeah,
of fun waves coming through. Still clean for a lot of Southern California right now.
yeah.
Um,
We're gonna have to cut out here pretty soon.
pretty soon, yeah.
We need to go do a little verification. I think.
Yeah, definitely need to go
Let's
check
get
my
on.
forecast out front there. But yeah, we'll see a bit more swell than we have. Conditions, we go from this nice summer-like pattern to the return of storms as we move into Wednesday. Not as strong as the storm systems that we saw in February, but conditions will definitely be a moving target, although it looks like we should see some windows, a nice conditions Wednesday morning. And then again, as we move through the end of the week into Friday of the weekend, looks like we got some more west-northwest swell stacking up and a little bit of southern hemisphere swell lingering around. So should be some waves for a lot of the beach breaks, and conditions improve then.
You're saying I might be surfing for the next couple of days.
There's going to be a lot of opportunity.
I'm hoping so. Yeah, yeah. I think the key is to, especially middle and second half of the week, kind of keep an eye on the cams, keep an eye on the most up to date forecasts, and try and dial in those windows where the wind is either light and or favorable in certain areas.
I mean, there's a lot of different facing coastlines in Southern California. So whether we have south winds coming up through the day tomorrow or kind of swirling winds on Wednesday or trend towards kind of northwesterly flow on Thursday, there's going to be some options around.
Yeah, it's a fun time of year. You know, we don't necessarily think of the spring as combo swell season because a lot of times the conditions are kind of meh. But I mean, you see the same combo swells we see in the fall, which is kind of the classic time in Southern California.
I mean, a lot of times it's more consistent.
Yeah, you don't see conditions line up as frequently in the spring. It certainly can happen, and it does, like we saw last weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it's too bad that we don't have the offshore flow of last week, the middle of this week, because we'd be looking at really just such a nice little run of waves. But you know, I'll still be surfing.
Yeah. And again, welcome to the Big Wave Live, a Big Wave Logger Live, brought to you by Kona Brewing Company. If you are just joining us, I am Director of Forecasting Kevin Wallace with lead forecaster Shaw Peria. We are live on the North Shore of Oahu at Waimea Bay. Actually, just saw really one of the biggest sets we've seen in the last probably hour or two, anyway, and that was solid. I always get a little nervous about throwing like Hawaiian 20-foot surf call out there, meaning 30, 35, 40-foot faces. But that last set was probably pushing it.
I'm sure it felt like it if you're in the lineup.
Yeah, solid 15 to 18 anyway. Definitely one of the bigger sets we've seen this morning. Swell is coming down a little bit now. It's gradually easing through the day, but certainly still some bombs out there. Our Waimea buoy, I believe it's come down just a little bit. What is it again? You've got it up.
Just under 16 feet, but the period has dropped from 17 seconds first thing this morning down to 15. So that definitely plays a pretty big role in how much face size you're going to see out there. Although, Waimea is definitely one of those places that likes that period just a little bit shorter in the realm of big wave spots.
Yeah. It's you've got the bathymetry of the North Shore and Waimea as such, and by bathymetry that's what's known as the underwater topography. It's such that there's a couple of neighboring offshore reefs out to the west, which is to the left of the screen you're looking at here, is outside alligators, and then kind of off to the right, and we'll occasionally see it when we actually shift to a different view. You've got outside log cabins. You can actually just see where some of that whitewash is out in the distance, kind of the towards the right-hand part of your screen, top right-hand part of the screen, is another outer reef called outside log cabins. And those two spots tend to really pull in and focus that long period energy. And then outside log cabins can actually focus some of that long period energy down towards pipe as well.
Yeah, definitely. From this view here, there was quite a bit more action first thing this morning as that period was a little bit longer.
Yeah. And so those two spots can act to steal away, so to speak. And I know nobody can see me, but I'm putting steal in air quotes right now. But it can pull away some of that longer period swell energy and leave Waimea in somewhat of a swell void. And so Waimea always does best on, or is biggest on swell that just is really large in deep water. and then tends to be slightly shorter in swell period, in the 15 to 16 second range. That's when Waimea is going to be biggest. When it's not especially big deep water swell, so say a swell size of around 10 feet, but very long period, say 18 to 20 seconds or especially greater. There are other spots that can be huge. Piahi on the north shore of Maui could take a 10-foot swell at 20 seconds from the right direction and create 30 to 40-foot faces, with some of the biggest waves even larger than that. Waimea is not even half the size of that. So it's just all about the underwater topography, the bathymetry of that particular break, and what it likes for swell period, what it likes for swell direction, and the math for Waimea is you want something from the northwest that's is slightly shorter in swell period, around 15 to 16 seconds or so, and basically that's what we've got right now. Swell is not a giant swell, but pretty good size. 15 feet at 15 seconds. That's a solid
lot of
swell.
swell.
Yeah,
I mean, it was definitely in that really solid range before dark yesterday, that 18-foot plus range, as you mentioned earlier, kind of really scraping the low end of what would be considered the criteria to run the eddy, or looking at past eddy swells, and that like 18 to 22-foot plus deep water swell range.
Yeah.
Kind of shorter to mid-period, relatively 14, 15, 16 seconds.
Yeah. When you go back and look at the last time the eddy was run, which was in February of 2016, that was a huge swell. That was one of the biggest swells they've ever run on. And if memory serves me correctly, I want to say the Waimea buoy was like 22 at 17 or 22 at 16 or something like that. Really big swell, and as big as that event has run on. I had all those. That one series of closeout sets in the morning, all the jet skis got huge, chased up the beach, and guys were going on closeouts all morning long, and the bay will start to close out, and what we heard was there may have been a couple of closeout sets early this morning. I
was like there might have been before dark yesterday too.
And so once you get north of 40-foot faces, and especially north of 45-foot faces, that's when you start to see the bay close out and become less rideable, manageable, whatever you want to call it. Some guys will just call it less manageable. I would call it not really rideable. Whereas some of the other spots nearby, the outside log cabins, which we just spoke to, had some huge waves ridden early in this season. And that was actually one of the Wave of the Winter entries from Eli Olson. I think it was either November 25th or November 26th. He had a huge wave at outside log cabins. I don't know. How big was that face?
Yeah.
60 feet?
At least. But then as you roll into kind of the top 10 entries from the Wave of the Winter, here we have Nathan Florence going left at the pipeline. Pipe's going to be fantastic tomorrow as the swell continues to come down.
Yeah. And so these, kind of almost all the entries came from three kind of times. It was the very end of November, right around, this is the same swell that the Jaws event was run on. We had
coming up through the day there. I think this third entry from Barron is the end of the day.
And we had some crazy waves from Healy and Cam Richards, which we'll see in a second. Some big, here we go.
How's this rolling? 200 yards,
yeah,
before he passes the boil.
There's the boil right there. That's kind of the traditional takeoff spot for the guys that ride really deep at First Reef Pipe. For anyone that doesn't know, is when you see that boil, that's kind of where a lot of those guys are taking off on First Reef waves. And Healy rode for probably 200 yards before he even hit the boil, which was pretty crazy.
And they got Cam riding a board that his dad shaped him. Insane wave. Benji Brand. Wow, how was that drop on that one?
Cool. Yeah, and this is actually one of my favorite waves of the winter too. And I didn't remember seeing it at the time. Just have seen it in the last week or so for some reason. But that was
such a critical
wave too. Yeah,
wave.
And then here we go.
On the boil, kind of feathered a little bit to get into it. That's just as big as it gets at First Reef.
That's as good a wave as you're ever going to see at Pipe. It just doesn't get any better than that. And then Corey's wave it back was obviously pretty crazy too. So although the O'Neill Wave of the Winter contest has officially ended now for this winter, we should still probably still some bragging rights potentially going on tomorrow as this swell drops and conditions clean up. And I think a pretty decent chance that we'll go live again tomorrow from Backdoor and Pipeline. And you can make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the little icon bell to be notified that next time we go live, which could be as early as tomorrow. And we are going to wrap up here. Been a lot of fun. Schaller talking about the North Shore, the swell, what's coming up for California. But we're going to wrap up because we're ready to go surf ourselves. I think,
Yeah, watching
front.
all these people get a couple of massive waves at Waimea has got me just
I'm pumped to
itching
go
for a
surf
surf
chest high.
in
I think it's a little
Huntington.
bit bigger than that up front.
Yeah, they about head high on
Yeah,
sets off
all
front,
right.
kind of peaky, still clean.
So we're Schaller and I are going to sign off, but we're going to leave this feed running for a little while. So all you guys and gals out there, enjoy and aloha.
Yeah, hopefully we'll see you tomorrow.
I think the world knows aloha in different ways. What aloha means to me is to wake up every morning and try to be the best version of yourself that you can be. Whether it be big or small, just always trying to move forward. That to me is pretty special. I think the world knows aloha in different ways. What aloha means to me is to wake up every morning and try to be the best version of yourself that you can be. Whether it be big or small, just always trying to move forward. That to me is pretty special. I think the world knows aloha in different ways. What aloha means to me is to wake up every morning and try to be the best version of yourself that you can be. Whether it be big or small, just always trying to move forward. That to me is pretty special.